The grand ballroom was illuminated with golden lights, casting a warm glow over the elegantly decorated space. White and gold flowers adorned every table, filling the air with a delicate floral scent. A large banner above the stage read, "Celebrating 50 Years of Love," honoring the milestone anniversary of William's grandparent. William adjusted the cuff of his navy ghoul suit, feeling an uncomfortable tightness in his chest, not from the formal attire, but from the weight of his own thoughts. Across the room, his wife, Chloe, stood surrounded by family, her laughter ringing out like a soft melody. She looked effortlessly beautiful in a deep blue dress, her chestnut waves cascading down her back. For a brief moment, William let himself admire her, the way she threw her head back when she laughed, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She was still Chloe, still the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago, but tonight, that realization didn't bring him comfort. Instead, it felt like grief. Because soon, she would no longer be his. This would be their last family event as a couple. William had already made his decision. After the weekend, he would have the conversation he had been dreading. He and Chloe would go their separate ways. It was the only solution left. He exhaled heavily, pushing away the ache in his chest. For tonight, they would pretend everything was fine, at least for the sake of his grandparents. William took a sip of his champagne, but the bitterness on his tongue wasn't from the drink. It was from the thoughts swirling in his mind. How did they end up like this? Just this morning, he and Chloe had another argument. The cause was trivial. She had forgotten to pay a bill. But the fight quickly escalated like so many others before it. "You never care about anything," he had snapped. "All you do is complain." Chloe had shot back before slamming the bedroom door. Their fights had become a routine, each one leaving behind fresh wounds that never had time to heal. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when their love felt effortless, when laughter filled their home instead of silence. But now, the weight of everyday frustrations had turned small annoyances into unbearable conflicts. William was a software engineer, someone who thrived on solving problems with logic and precision. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't fix his marriage. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Every moment together felt strained. And so, he had made up his mind. Divorce, once an unthinkable idea, now seemed like the only way forward. They had no children, which would make the process easier. Maybe, in time, they could both move on, find happiness elsewhere. "Let's just get through this night," Chloe had said in the car earlier, her voice almost pleading. "We can't ruin your grandparents' celebration." William had agreed, even though his heart felt heavier than ever. Now, as he watched her from across the room, pretending to smile, pretending everything was fine, he wondered, was this really the only way? Throughout the evening, relatives and friends approached William with warm smiles, offering compliments that felt more like tiny daggers to his heart. "Chloe looks absolutely radiant tonight," his aunt gushed. "You two are such a perfect match." "I still remember your wedding day," another relative chimed in. "It was one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever attended." William nodded, forcing a polite smile. But inside, their words stirred something painful. A perfect match, a beautiful wedding, if only they knew how much had changed. His mind drifted back to that day, their wedding day. He could still see Chloe in her white dress, walking down the aisle with that breathtaking smile. He remembered how his hands trembled slightly as he placed the ring on her finger, how his heart swelled with certainty as he vowed to love her forever. Back then, they were inseparable, the kind of couple people envied. They spoke in inside jokes, finished each other's sentences, held hands under the dinner table like teenagers. They had built their love on shared dreams and whispered promises. But now, they were nothing more than strangers sharing the same space. But somewhere along the way, life got in the way. The pressures of work, the stress of daily routines, the unspoken resentments that built up over time, all of it had slowly eroded the love that once felt unshakable. And now, standing here at this celebration of lasting love, William couldn't help but wonder, had they let go too soon? The clinking of glasses and gentle hum of conversation slowly faded as the evening's main event began. all eyes turned to the stage, where William's grandparents, Thomas and Eleanor, sat in beautifully decorated chairs, their hands intertwined like two young lovers. The master of ceremonies stepped forward with a warm smile. "Tonight, we are honored to have a very special guest, someone who was there when Thomas and Eleanor first began their journey together. Please welcome Pastor Samuel, the man who officiated their wedding 50 years ago." A hush fell over the room as an elderly man with white hair and thin-rimmed glasses slowly made his way onto the stage. Though his steps were careful, his presence commanded attention. William had never met him before, but when the pastor spoke, his voice was surprisingly strong, carrying the weight of wisdom earned through years of witnessing love in all its forms. "Many young couples ask me," the pastor began, "what the secret is to a long and happy marriage. They hope for a simple answer, a magic formula that will make everything easy. But the truth is, there is no secret. There is only a choice." William felt a slight chill run down his spine. "Romantic love, the kind that makes your heart race, is wonderful," the pastor continued, "but it is not enough to sustain a lifetime together. What keeps a couple united for 50 years is not just love, it is commitment. It is waking up every morning and choosing your partner, even on the days when it is difficult, especially on those days." William's grip tightened around his glass. The pastor's words felt uncannily personal, as if the old man knew exactly what he was going through. "Many couples walk away at the first sign of hardship," Pastor Samuel said, his voice steady, unwavering. "They convince themselves that love has faded. But love does not vanish. It transforms. It deepens. It is in the moments of doubt, in the storms of uncertainty, that love is either lost or forged into something unbreakable." William swallowed hard, glancing at Chloe out of the corner of his eye. She was standing just a few feet away, her arms crossed lightly over her chest. Though she wasn't looking at him, he could tell she was listening just as intently as he was. "Marriage is like a garden," the pastor went on. "You cannot simply plant it once and expect it to flourish forever. It requires daily care, watering, pruning, pulling out the weeds. It is hard work. Some days, you won't feel like doing it, but when you see the flowers bloom, you will know that every effort was worth it." William's mind raced. He thought of all the times he had neglected his own garden, the small acts of kindness left undone, the words of love left unsaid, the moments he had chosen distance over connection. Thomas and Eleanor did not have 50 perfect years, the pastor smiled. They had 50 years of choosing each other, over and over again. And that is what real love is. As the room erupted in applause, William sat frozen in his seat, heart pounding. Had he been about to throw everything away, just because the garden had a few weeds? The ceremony continued, but for William, everything else faded into the background. His mind was a storm of thoughts, replaying the pastor's words over and over again. Love is a choice, a garden that must be cared for daily, choosing each other even on the hardest days. As the night wound down and guests began to disperse, William noticed Chloe standing alone near the balcony doors, gazing out at the night sky. For a brief moment he hesitated. The weight of everything that had been left unsaid between them pressed against his chest. Then, with a deep breath, he walked toward her. "Chloe," he said softly. She turned, her green eyes reflecting both surprise and something else, hesitation, uncertainty. "Can we talk? Outside?" She studied him for a moment before nodding. Without a word, they stepped out into the cool night air. The garden outside the reception hall was quiet, the distant hum of laughter and music muffled by the walls. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly across the dark sky. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then William broke the silence. I was ready to walk away," he confessed, his voice thick with regret. "I thought we had already lost everything, that there was nothing left to fight for." Chloe's breath hitched, but she didn't look away. "So did I," she confessed. "I stopped trying. I let my frustration take over, and I thought, maybe you just didn't care anymore." William felt a pang of guilt. How many times had she waited for him to reach out? How many times had he let the silence linger instead? But tonight, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. That speech, it made me realize something. Love isn't something that just stays perfect on its own. It needs work. And I haven't been putting in the effort. I haven't been choosing you, Chloe, not the way I should have. A tear slipped down Chloe's cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. I still love you, William, she whispered. But I don't know if love is enough anymore. He reached for her hands, holding them tightly. Then, let's make it enough. Let's choose each other again, every day, no matter how hard it gets. Chloe let out a trembling breath, then, slowly, cautiously, nodded. Okay, she whispered. I choose you, William. And under the vast, starry sky, they held on to each other, knowing that this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. The drive home that night was different. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no heavy silence between them, no cold distance, no lingering bitterness. Instead, there was something fragile yet profound, an unspoken understanding. They weren't magically healed. Their problems hadn't disappeared overnight. But something was different. For the first time in months, they weren't fighting against each other, they were fighting for each other. That night, after stepping inside their quiet home, neither of them turned away like they usually did. There was no retreating into separate corners, no hiding behind exhaustion or frustration. Instead, they sat down together, side by side, and talked. Not about bills, not about work, not about the little things that had become mountains between them, but about the things that truly mattered. I thought I was losing you, Chloe admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. William swallowed hard, his hands clasped together. I thought I had already lost you. She let out a shaky breath, looking down. I stopped trying. I thought maybe you didn't care anymore. That hurt, not because it wasn't true, but because it was. He had stopped showing her he cared. Not because he didn't love her, but because somewhere along the way, he had let frustration overshadow love. He had let resentment take root instead of choosing patience. He had let the weight of daily life dull the very thing that had once made their relationship so special. I did care, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I still do, I just forgot how to show it. Chloe glanced at him then, her eyes glistening. So did I. And just like that, they made a promise, one that wasn't spoken, but felt in the way they held each other that night, as if they were afraid to let go again. The next morning, William woke up before his alarm. He glanced over at Chloe, still fast asleep, her face peaceful in the early morning light. For a moment, he just watched her, taking in the quiet rise and fall of her breath. Then, instead of checking his phone like he usually did, he got up, went to the kitchen, and brewed 2 cups of coffee. When he placed Chloe's cup on her bedside table, she blinked up at him in surprise. You made me coffee? She murmured, voice still laced with sleep. He shrugged. I used to do it all the time. A small, tired smile tugged at her lips. Yeah, you did. A small gesture, a tiny step, but the way her fingers curled around the warm mug, it felt like the beginning of something new. Slowly, the little things started coming back. Chloe began leaving notes in his lunch bag again, like she used to when they were dating, sometimes sweet, sometimes teasing, sometimes just a simple, thinking of you. William made an effort to truly listen when she spoke, instead of half listening while scrolling through his phone. They started having dinner together at the table, instead of eating in separate rooms with the TV on. It wasn't perfect, far from it. There were still fights, still moments of frustration, still days when they hurt each other without meaning to, but the difference was, they didn't walk away from each other anymore. One evening, after a particularly heated argument over something trivial, who forgot to take out the trash, William had stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. But this time, instead of letting the silence fester, Chloe followed him. She sat beside him on the bed, crossing her arms. Are we really going to do this again? William exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. I don't know how to stop us from arguing. Chloe sighed, nudging his shoulder. Maybe we don't have to stop arguing. Maybe we just have to start arguing differently. He glanced at her. What does that even mean? She gave a small, tired smile. It means that even when I'm mad at you, even when I want to strangle you for being stubborn, I still choose you. I still want to figure it out, and I need to know that you do too." William's chest tightened, because the truth was, he did. "I do," he said softly. Chloe nodded. "Then let's figure it out. Together." And in that moment, William realized something. Love wasn't about never fighting. It wasn't about avoiding problems. It was about choosing to stay, even when things were messy, even when it was hard. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of the work it would take. Because she was worth it. They were worth it. And this time, he was ready to fight for them. The years passed, not in a blur, but in a collection of moments, some joyful, some difficult, but all of them shared. William and Chloe still argued. They still had days where frustration flared, where one of them wanted space, where life threw unexpected challenges their way. But through it all, they never stopped choosing each other. They built a life together, not a perfect one, but a real one. A life filled with small gestures that spoke louder than words. A life where even after a long, exhausting day, they still reached for each other instead of pulling away. And just like that, 25 years passed. Now, standing in a beautifully decorated ballroom once again, William adjusted the cuff of his suit, just like he had all those years ago. But this time, there was no weight in his chest, no doubts clouding his mind. Tonight, they weren't here to celebrate someone else's love story. Tonight, it was their turn, their silver anniversary. 25 years of marriage. As the guests raised their glasses, William turned to Chloe. She still took his breath away. Time had changed them both. There were fine lines around her eyes, a few silver strands in her chestnut hair, but when she smiled at him, she was still the same woman he had fallen in love with. "If you had to choose again," Chloe murmured, teasing, "would you still pick me?" William didn't hesitate. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I choose you, Chloe," he said, his voice unwavering. "Not just today, not just always, but every single moment in every version of our story, no matter how it's written." She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears, before whispering, "Me too." And as their family and friends clapped around them, as they shared a knowing smile, William and Chloe silently thanked the wise old pastor from years ago, the man whose words had saved them from walking away from something worth fighting for. Because love wasn't just something that happened, it was something you chose every day. And tonight, they were living proof that it was worth it. Love isn't always easy, it isn't always grand gestures or perfect moments. It's a choice to stay, a choice to fight, a choice to nurture something that, at times, feels fragile. William and Chloe's story wasn't about avoiding struggles. It was about learning to grow through them. And in the end, they proved that when two people are willing to choose each other, even on the hardest days, love can endure. So ask yourself, if you had to choose again, would you still pick the person you love? Because sometimes the right words at the right time can change everything.